Hey, how you doing? I hope you're well. I'm Deanna and welcome to my channel. I cannot believe it is already May. This year feels like it's gone by so fast. So today we are going to run through my reading for April. This is most likely going to be a bit of a long one, so feel free to grab yourself a tea or a coffee or some snacks as we go through all 18 books that I read in April. I will try and go as rapid fire as possible. In fact, some of these are series, so we can kind of lump them together. But without further ado, let's get on to the reading stats. So having a look at the stats, as I said, I read 18 books in April, which is possibly the most amount I've ever read. I did have the first 2 weeks of April off work, so that probably accounts for the fact that I read a ton. And of those 18 books, that totaled 6,357 pages, which is wild. My average rating was 4.4, but as you can see, overall, a very good reading month. I didn't give any book under 3.5 stars, which is a win in my eyes. And we had bulk of the books being 4.5 or 4 stars. For a genre breakdown, my two biggest genres were paranormal and romance, which honestly is not a big surprise because those are two of my favorite genres. So I read 8 paranormal books and 6 romance books. Moving on to formats, really no surprise here. Most of the books I read were audiobooks. In the last year, audiobooks have become my preferred reading format, and I read 7 audiobooks. I'm a little bit behind in my ARC reading, so that's advanced reader copy, but I'm glad to see that I still managed to get through 2, which is always nice. And then we had 5 ebooks and 4 physical books. And last but not least, the stat I like to track is series versus standalone. So I am a massive series reader, but have a horrible habit of starting new series and then just never finishing them. So I like to keep track of how many first books versus sequels versus standalones that I read each month. So this month was pretty even split across the board, which I haven't seen in a while. So I did read 6 first books in a series. So I started 6 series. And then I read 6 sequels, which was nice. And then 7 of the books I read this month were standalones. In April, I did take part in the magical Readathon Aurelium that is hosted by G over at Book Roast. It is one of my all-time favorite readathons. So I chose the Wild Form Druid as my calling, which had 8 classes that I needed to complete, and I completed all 8 within April. I will leave a pictorial up of the books I read for each of those prompts if you're interested. I've been going back and forth about how to talk about these books. Do I group them up with readathon books and then other books, but I think I might just stick with going through them chronologically. So I will try to keep this as short as possible, but I tend to ramble. So for some of the books that I really did truly love, there will be no stopping me. The first book I picked up in April was Cherished by Emilia Emerson, and this is actually the 3rd book in her Lunar and Soul series, which is an Omegaverse, and probably is one of the darker Omegaverses I've read recently. It kind of fits to more the traditional Omegaverse world. If you're on AO3 at all in the mid-2010s, you know what I'm talking about. The reason I picked this one up is because I had seen it all over Instagram, and it had chronic illness rep, which I have chronic pain, so that's always something that I like to see in my books. Quick guide to Omegaverse. This is basically a paranormal alternate reality where people are designated different classes, I guess. You've got alphas, who are the protectors and the big, tough, strong people of the world. You've got betas, who are mostly like human and just very average, for lack of a better term. And you've got omegas, who are considered to be the weaker of the classes. In this world in particular, have 0 rights, and their pure value is the fact that they can have kids and their fertility. So in this world, we are seeing the aftermath of the duet, where this town is being forced to make changes and ensure that omegas are treated as regular citizen. They don't have to defer to their alphas, and they are slowly trying to attain autonomy. We have Weston, who is honestly going through a rough time. Her parents had died when she was young, and she was placed into care with her aunt and her aunt's mates, who are honestly the most horrid people in existence. And basically she's living alone and she's kind of trying to navigate this new world. She works in a bakery with the heroine of the first series, whose name I've forgotten, and is, just trying to live her best life. Unfortunately, she has this chronic pain and this chronic illness, but she's been gaslit by her uncles and the doctors that she's seen to basically say it's all in her head, she's making it up, it's just an amigo wanting attention. So she is doing all her best to push through and is scared to open up to her new friend and boss and tell her what's going on, because everyone who has supposed to cared for her and whose opinion she's supposed to trust has basically told her that she's making it up. I will say the chronic pain representation and the medical gaslighting that happens in here is done really well. It's kind of hard to read at times, but it just feels super authentic. While this is all happening and she's trying to figure out her own life, trying to navigate her illness, she ends up getting these stalker notes and ends up actually being attacked. So trigger warnings for attempted assault. Because of that, her friend hires her a bodyguard. So her first mate is Gray, her bodyguard. We then have Henry, who is actually one of the lawyers who's been hired to help reform the policies, and Weston meets at a council meeting. And then we have Liam, who is an alpha nurse. And then we have Liam's roommate, Bear, who runs a motorcycle garage and is a former bikie. And it is their romance. So we get to see Weston slowly fall for her Fall Guys and see the pack form. And I loved them getting to know each other and forming like this found family. And then we have Weston seeking the medical treatment she has and the fear she has that finding out that she's sick and that potentially it's chronic and that there's no end to this illness was just, really beautifully done. So very intrigued by this world, and having seen the aftermath of it, I am excited to dive into the first book and see what that one is all about. But yes, had to pick it up for the chronic illness representation, and I think it was done beautifully, and the romance kept me hooked and engaged, and I loved the way it developed. Next up, I picked up You Goddess by E. Foley and B. Coates, and this is a non-fiction self-help type book, and it was a lot of fun. As it says here, it is a lesson in being legendary from awesome immortals. So this is broken down into chapters, and we get to know a little bit about goddesses from around the world, from very popular mythologies like your Greek, Roman, Norse, Egyptian, and then we also get to see some deities and immortals from lesser known communities such as Japan, West Africa. We have some Hindu goddesses, some Celtic goddesses, and even deities from the Aboriginal Dreamtime, which was really cool. And so we get to learn about these mythological figures, and then basically we get a little self-help guide about how we can be more like them. And it's just a lot of fun. We've got each page is kind of introduces the character, and we just get to know a little bit about them, and the humor in here is hilarious. Like, there's footnotes throughout as they put a modern spin on mythology. In Athena's chapter, they're talking about the Trojan War, and in particular the apple scene, and it says the Trojan warrior and Greece's next top goddess judge, Paris, famously judged Aphrodite to be better looking than Athena. So we have those beautiful little footnotes as well. So this was feel good, fun, comedic read, which I really liked, and I was also introduced to a number of different deities I'd be interested in learning about, and thankfully they've included resources that I can refer to learn more about these mythologies. Keeping on the mythology train, I finally picked up A Song of Sacrifice by Janelle Rhiannon. This has been a book that I bought the minute I found out it was a indie release Trojan War retelling, and has promptly sat on my shelf for years because reasons, unknown reasons. So we get to have a look at the build-up to the Trojan War, which is just truly captivating. Like a lot of modern myth retellings, we are focusing on the female characters, but we do also get a number of perspectives from the well-known heroes. What I love most about this is that we start with Hecuba being pregnant with Paris, and we see what happens with his storyline. When we go across to the Achaeans or the Greeks, we then see just how big this myth is and just how connected mythology is. So you get to learn about Helen's creation, for lack of a better word. You've got Achilles and his parents and their wedding, you know, and Eris crashes the wedding, and then we've got the golden apple and we've got the apple contest. So the way that Janelle has been able to weave together all these myths and all these characters and present them as this is how the war started was quite beautifully done. This book does leave off as the Greeks are about to set sail to Troy, so I am excited to pick up the next 2 books in the series to see what is happening. But I think she did a beautiful job at introducing the key players and situating them within the myth and giving a little wider context to who they are. Just absolutely flew through this one. It's one of those things where I know what's going to happen because I know the myth, but I'm excited to see how Janelle tells the story. Okay, next up, I was in the mood for something short, steamy, I guess, and fun, and so I picked up The Vampire in the Bookstore by L.M. Drew. This is the first book I have read by L.M. Drew, and I know that she is pretty well known for her plus-size representation in books. I love vampires, I love bookshops, so this seemed like a no-brainer as a first point of contact for me. This one follows a vampire named Declan, who's an author, and basically lived a very long life in isolation, and one of the pure joys of his life is books. And at his regular antique bookstore, he bumps into this woman named Rosamond, and it is their very, very short, very spicy, off with a bang romance. There's a massive insta-love, insta-lust, which I didn't mind because it was only 140 pages, and yeah, it's very condensed between their meeting at the bookstore, they go out for dinner, and then there is a night of passion, we shall say. It was a really fun time. I love the plus size representation, and I'll be interested to pick up more of L.M. Drew's backlist. Next up, we have a book that's been on my TBR for the longest time, and I was really in a rockstar romance mood, so I picked up Hamartia by Scarlett Drake, and this is an MM rockstar romance. So in this we have Raphael, who was the lead singer of rock band The Dead Poets, and his romance with Jae-hoon, who is a K-pop idol from KOS. And KOS is definitely like BTS coded. So Raphael first met Jae-hoon backstage at a music awards, I'm pretty sure, in Paris. And him and his bandmates are kind of off their face and making some really inappropriate comments about KOS, in particularly Jae-hoon. And Jae-hoon walks up and sees them. He pretends that he doesn't understand them, and then very gracefully and graciously just walks away. This sparks Raphael's interest with Jae-hoon. He feels really horrible about what he said and wants to do something to apologize. And this leads into Raphael's kind of sexual awakening. He is engaged to a French model turned actress and seems to be living his best life. The band just released a new album which pushed their music into a different direction, and they have been nominated for a Grammy Award for Album of the Year. Raphael meets Jae-hoon again at his record label, where they bump into each other quite literally, and a friendship starts to form. So Raphael really is figuring out what he wants out of life. He knows he wants Jay, but doesn't really know what to do and feels like he can't give Jay up. Jay is this interesting character. He's quite reserved and is an absolute workaholic. I mean, just the K-pop release schedules is insane, let alone rehearsal and dance practice and everything like that. And he is the epitome of that. He is an absolute perfectionist and will do everything he can to ensure that he is doing his part for the band and everything for his fans. And I just loved it. This book is mainly told from Raphael's point of view, but we do get a handful of chapters from Jay's perspective, which I thought was a really sweet touch. And Jay is in this tough spot where he really wants something serious with Raphael, but knows that his label can veto his relationship. The way that KOS's label completely controls their image and what they portray to their fans is insane. There is a lot of angst in this. Trigger warnings for cheating. I don't like cheating in books unless it's an MM romance apparently, and then I'll forgive it. But it was just angsty, and we do get a bit of music. We've got the Grammy Awards. We do get to see Jay performing and practicing, and I just completely loved it. I really want to read it again, and I'm excited to see what Scarlett Drake writes next. And keeping on my rockstar romance, I picked up another book that I've been desperate to read, which is Because You Said by C.L. Manigan. And this is the first book in her Up in Light series. So this is a dark romantic suspense rockstar romance. We follow Harmony, who is up and coming musician in the New York scene. She's pretty much playing dive bars, doing everything she can to get her name out there. Nothing can tear her apart from music. Her parents tried to stop her. She said no and they kicked her out. So music is 100% her life and soul. And then she meets Asher, who is the guitarist of a very prominent metal band called Chasing the Storm. And he has just come back from a European tour where they worked hard, partied harder. His childhood friend calls in a favor. He's sick as a dog, can't make the gig he's got scheduled tonight, and asks if Asher can fill in. Asher doesn't really want to do this after coming home and being exhausted from a tour, but ends up going and ends up in this dive bar in New York where he meets Harmony. These two have an absolute instant attraction for each other, and they have this instant connection because they can both tell that the other person just loves and adores music. And Asher is completely captivated by Harmony. He ends up taking her back to LA with him, where they have a show, and while there, something happens and she gets attacked. She doesn't say anything to Asher at the time. When she ends up back in New York, goes to a gig. Unfortunately, afterwards, is attacked quite brutally. So again, please check your trigger warnings, and ends up fleeing the state. And it is Asher and Harmony's second chance romance. And I loved Harmony's strength. She went through something quite horrific and she's still dealing with that trauma, and she lets music be her voice. She does meet up with Asher a year or so later, and it's them trying to navigate their what could have been and their relationship. And I completely ate this up. It was just beautiful, and I cannot wait to dive into the rest of the series, honestly. Taking a bit of a turn, the next book I picked up was Role Playing by Kathy Yardley, and I had so much fun with this. First off, this is a romance where both of the characters are in their 40s, which is so refreshing to see. And we follow Maggie, who is grumpy and is kind of a hermit after her divorce. Her son is just going off to college, and she's very content with her life. She's a freelance editor, I'm pretty sure, and doesn't really see the need to change anything. However, she makes a deal with her son, who's struggling to fit into college, that she will do more to be more social. She ends up at a couple of unfortunate small town events, which she doesn't like, but through that ends up joining a online gaming guild run by this guy whose screen name is Otto. I mean, I'm not a video game girly, but I really liked both characters find connection and escapism from video games, which obviously as a reader I can understand that need to have escapism. And then Otto is in his late 40s, and he is using this guild to escape. He has quit his job and is taking care of his aging mother after the death of their father, and his brother is no help whatsoever. So he's got a really horrific family situation, and this game is his outlet. And what I love about this is that mistaken identity thing that happens. So Maggie assumes that Otto is her son's age because at the potluck, the women are her age, and they said, oh, my son's friend is at a community college and he's got this online gaming guild. And then because Maggie makes these comments that she's too old for them, he thinks she's this like crotchety 88-year-old woman. And it's just so much fun. The pair end up meeting in real life as Aiden has hurt his leg after trying to do some DIY in his mum's house, and she offers to cook him lunch. And yeah, that was one of the funniest meet cutes I think I've ever seen in my life. And I just love the way that even though Maggie is socially awkward, she's able to help Aiden stand up for himself with his family and tell people no and set boundaries. This was a lot of fun. I completely devoured it. I listened to it in a day, and one I'll probably reread if I'm in the mood. Next up, we have my only 5-star read of the month, which was When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill. This was incredible. So the subtitle is The Truthful According of the Life of Alex Green, physicist, professor, activist, still human, a memoir of sorts. So as you can tell by that kind of subtitle. This is a faux memoir. This is set mainly in the 50s and 60s. We had basically that there was this massive event, national event that happened where, as the title suggests, women turned into dragons. And this was just a really beautiful and poignant exploration of female rage, and done in a way with the fact that these women turned dragons to escape the constraints that society has thrust at them. And we see it from Alex, who is a kid at the time. Her aunt becomes a dragon, and we see Alex really unsure about what's happening. Her mother takes over her narrative and is very much like, we don't talk about this. You don't have an aunt. Your cousin is now your sister, and we don't talk about it. And then we see Alex as she's growing up, and you know, she's getting her period for the first time, and there's this whole look at society of like, again, you can't talk about it. And she's taking care of her cousin or a little sister who even at a young age is quite willful and quite wild and free and rebellious, and even at such a young age is wanting to dragon. And I completely devoured this. I love that it's written like a memoir, and every now and then interspersed throughout the novel we get redacted interviews from government meetings and news articles and letters from women who explained what happened and why they dragoned, and it was just so good. I was completely captivated, and the way that I just wanted to read this time and time again, and the way Alex kind of came to terms with both her mother's choice to remain human and sacrifice everything to raise her children, and then on the flip side, her aunt who couldn't possibly live another day without being her true authentic self, and then Alex trying to come to terms with what that means for her sister is just beautiful, and completely adored this one. If you're into like a magical realism with like a fake memoir type book, I'd highly recommend When Women Were Dragons. Next, I read Bite of Loyalty and Bite of Betrayal by R.L. Calder. This is the first two books in her Blood Oath series, and in this one we follow Lena Van Helsing, who is a vampire hunter. And in this world we have vampires, vampire hunters, and a lot of other magical creatures. For the vampire hunters, at a certain age, supposed to get married to strengthen family bonds and all that jazz. Alina isn't too interested in it, and the night before this ritual is about to take place, she is out with her two best friends at a nightclub, having a fun time and drinking away her problems. Unfortunately, while she's out partying, her entire family has been massacred by vampires, and by the time she comes home, it's too late. And while distracted, a vampire gets her and turns her into a vampire. And for a vampire hunter is a fate worse than death. She ends up at a magical academy where supernaturals are there to hone their powers, and in the vampire realm in particular, the strongest candidate ends up getting a job with Dracula, the very man Alina believes was sent to kill her family and turn herself. So Alina takes the chance and do her best to become the best candidate in hopes of killing Dracula. I love a paranormal romance series with a magical academy, so I completely adored this. I devoured books 1 and books 2, and we're following, especially in the first one, Alina just coming to terms with how to be a vampire, and also really coming up with her revenge plot. This is a why choose, so we do have a couple of fated mates in here, and it gets a little tricky as the series goes on, and Alina is just trying to stay alive because she's kind of painted a big target on her back. But this was a lot of fun. I cannot wait to finish off the series. I think there's 2 books to go, and this was exactly the pick-me-up I needed. I then picked up In Her Own Rite by Rowan Wilder, which was a recommendation I got as a comp title for A Wolf in the Garden by Allegra Hall. So In Her Own Rite is a friends to lovers romance set in this world where I believe it's based on one of the Scandinavian states, and the Faraki people are shifters essentially, and Emerson hasn't shifted in years since she was a child. She is very much separated from her wolf, and she doesn't feel safe at all. after witnessing her father's abuse to her mother and to herself. And the one person she feels safe with is Kieran, who is her best friend. And they are completely inseparable. They sleep next to each other every night as they can't bear to be apart. But there is something about their relationship where neither one believes the other is interested and doesn't want to take the risk to, I guess, get rejected and ruin their friendship. So Kieran is about to go on his rite, which is a very dangerous thing. They go up to the top of the mountain nearby and are supposed to come face to face with their biggest fear. What happens up there really shakes Kieran to his core, and he's convinced that Emerson isn't safe. And then we have these series of attacks happening from a rival group of shifters, which really starts to make Kieran feel that what he saw in the ring as part of a kind of spiritual hallucination is correct. And tension brewing with the string of attacks, Emerson decides that she is going to put her hat in the ring and do the right, which Kieran loses his mind about. Watching Emerson learn to accept her wolf and learn to heal from what happened and find her strength. She might not be the strongest of them, but there is strength in that as well. And then watching Kieran let go of his anxieties and fears and that overprotective nature he has towards Emerson and learning to trust that she can protect herself and that she will come to him when she needs is just beautiful. And I just completely loved it. And the world in here is really interesting, the way the culture is set up. And we do have, I guess, in terms of like a monster romance with wolves, it does fall on the Amigaverse line where we've got knots and heats and stuff. And if you have read and liked A Wolf in the Garden, I highly recommend picking up In Her Own Rite. I'm excited to read more in this world. And then I started and finished a series. So I picked up L. Thorpe's St. View Prison series. So I read Locked Up Liars, Solitary Sinners, and Fatal Felons. And this is part of her overall St. View universe, which is a dark romance with romantic suspense themes. And this one is set in a prison. In this one, we follow May. At the start of this book, her sister, Jayla, who is a police officer, is found murdered in their apartment. And Jayla's ex-boyfriend, Heath, and May's biggest crush, is arrested for the murder. Heath was the police's first suspect as Heath and May met up with each other at a bar, and Heath had come over for a nightcap and spent the night with May, however, was found the next morning covered in Jayla's blood. So it seems to be a no-brainer, case closed. However, May doesn't feel like it's correct and is going to do everything she can to get Heath released from the sentence and potentially death row. Along the way, she seeks the counsel of Liam, who is a guy she went to high school with, who is now a high-powered lawyer, and she bumps heads with Roe, who was one of the head security guards at the prison. As a way to get in touch with Heath and figure out what's going on and make sure Heath's okay in the maximum security jail, May applies for a job to be a prison teacher, and she slowly gets involved from there. And this was a wild ride. If you've read an L. Thorpe book before, each book ends on a cliffhanger, and what happens and what is revealed has my jaw dropping. I finished this series in like 2 days because I just needed to know what was going to happen. This is just absolutely enthralling, and I just never see the twists coming. I will say with this one, as I have read St. View Psychos and we see Vincent in here, there was a little bit in the third book which I kind of had spoiled myself for, but I still enjoyed seeing Vincent's character and actually getting to see what had been hinted at in St. View Psychos. So if you're in the mood for a completely wild romantic suspense ride with a Why Choose romance, I should say, this is a Why Choose romance. She does get with Heath and Roe and Liam with good plus size rep and excellent spice. I highly recommend picking up this series and any of L. Thorpe's books in her St. View universe. And then I picked up Frozen in Time by Crystal North, which I was sent a review copy from Chaotic Creatives and Crystal North. So thank you so much for sending that through. This was so much fun and I just completely devoured it. It had me smiling, giggling, laughing the whole way through. So we follow Soraya, who is literally having the worst day ever. She is about to get married to a man she doesn't really like. And to make matters worse, she finds out that he's been cheating on her and in fact catches him sleeping with someone else on their wedding day. For whatever reason, decides to go on with the wedding in hopes that, you know, they'll have a chat about it on their honeymoon and maybe she'll change his ways. Thankfully, her best friend Savannah steps in and has gifted her this necklace as a wedding present. And just as they're about to exchange vows, her and this odious man, Soraya, is transported to an alternate Iceland where the Norse gods Thor, Loki, and their two friends Sky and Ivan are. The group have been trapped there by Odin, as basically he was sick of Thor and Loki's fighting and arguments, and they're going to be there until they learn to get along. One of the things I loved about this is seeing Soraya's confidence grow and the way that she is able to believe in herself through getting to know each of the guys. So this is another Why Choose, and I will say I wish this was a little bit longer because once that happens and then the group ends up back at Asgard, the rest of the book really wraps up after that. There is like an MCU quality to Asgard and Thor and Loki, which I thought was fun. But yeah, I just really would have liked to get a little bit more to see what happens with the group and the dynamic after they get together, and then to figure out how the whole plot progresses once Asgard's involved and Soraya's identity is revealed. But if you like the sound of an MCU-inspired Norse mythology time travel romance, I would highly recommend this one. It was a really fun time. Then I finally made some progress in the Plated Prisoner series by Raven Kennedy by picking up Glint. This is book 2. This is a dark fantasy romance, which is a King Midas retelling, and I wasn't too impressed with the first book. Like, I like the concepts, but there is like limited romance in that, and there's a lot of sexual assault and sexual abuse that happens, particularly towards the character, and so I wasn't a big fan of that. But in this one, we pick up right after the first book, Guild, and I think what I liked about this one is that we're finally seeing Oren get some autonomy and actually stand up for herself. She's kind of been gaslit into believing that her life with King Midas and trapped in a cage was the best for her and the only thing that was going to keep her safe. She's slowly starting to realize that that might not be the case, and we're getting to know a little bit more about the world. So she's currently with the Seventh Kingdom, I believe it is, and there is a brewing war between the Seventh Kingdom and King Midas, and he's just essentially taken over another kingdom in the guise of being a regent until the rightful heir grows up and takes the throne. So I think this rest of this series is going to dive into that kind of political war and intrigue, which I'm always fascinated by, and I'm hoping we get to see more of Oren's growth because she is a powerhouse in her own right. She just needs to believe it. It'll be interesting to see what happens there, especially with this kind of potential romance with Commander Rip. So yes, won't say much more because it is a sequel and I am intrigued to continue on with this series. Picked up another novella, which was Beta by Gillian Rink, which is book 1.5 in her Serendipity Omegaverse series. This was a review copy that I was kindly sent by Fated and Julian herself. So thank you so much for sending that through to me. I really loved this world, and in this one I believe this is like a real taster into what's going to happen in the official second book in this series, and this is an MMM romance. So I really loved all of the characters and the dynamic, and I'm interested to see how this is going to play out in the next book. So we have Jasper, who is a beta, and he is a cellist in the San Francisco, I believe it is, Philharmonic. And I really just loved the orchestral setting. It was a fun time. And it's Jasper's budding relationship with Ryland, who is a bassist in the orchestra, and Dominic, who he met on online dating and appears to be part of the mafia. He's a made man and is doing whatever he can to escape that lifestyle. And it was a lot of fun. We got to meet these characters, and Jasper is beautifully oblivious to to Ryland's affections. In fact, they end up in this forced proximity situation after Jasper's apartment floods, and Ryland offers him to stay. And we get to see that dynamic work. And then we've got Dominic, who is trying to escape his family's business, and the only way his father agrees to let him have access to his trust fund is to form a pack and attend one of their council's galas, which is essentially ends up being like a matchmaking service for packs and their omegas. So yeah, this was a lot of fun, a lot of spice, and yeah, I'm interested to see what's going to happen in the next book. And last but not least, I read Bride by Ellie Hazelwood. This is my first Ellie Hazelwood. I love a paranormal romance, so I'm always intrigued by it. But when the reviews started coming out that this was a very slight Omegaverse that was traditionally published, I was intrigued. I had to figure out what is happening. So in this world, we follow Misery Lark, who is a vampire. In fact, she's daughter of the unofficial head of the Vampire Council, and she is pretty much an outcast. Growing up, she was given as collateral. Basically, the vampires and the humans had a very tenuous truce between each other, and to show that they were of the same page, each 10 years or so, the humans would offer the vampires a human child, and then the vampires would give the humans a vampire child to live with them. And if either party did something to break the truce, the child got it. So Misery survived mostly due to her best friend, who was a human girl called Sienna. So Misery is living her life in the human world with her friend Sienna when she gets roped back into the Vampire Council. And they are trying to broker a truce with the Wares, and decides the way to do that is through a marriage of convenience. Misery first wants to tell the Vampire Council and her father to go screw themselves, but Sienna has gone missing, and the only clue she has is a name, L.E. Morland. And she finds out that the husband-to-be of the Wares is a man named Lo Morland. So she takes the chance to go ahead and marry him in hopes of finding her friends. And I just love this. I really like the writing style. It was just completely captivating. Like most traditionally published romances I see, this is told purely from Misery's point of view, which really helps with the slow burn romance because we can't really tell what Lo is feeling. We do have, at the start of each chapter, there is like a sentence or a paragraph from his point of view, but ultimately we're just in Misery's head, and she is hilarious. I know Ellie Hazelwood is known for her STEMinist romances, and Misery is a hacker, so I love that she still squeezed like the STEM aspects of her writing and work into this. And she doesn't know anything about were culture and is very much convinced that Lo isn't into her. And I think it just, having it from her point of view just adds to the extra tension of will they, won't they get together, of this slow burn romance. And yes, we do have very slight Omegaverse, obviously. Misery is not a were, but we have knots and things. And yeah, this was a fun time. The book ends, potential for a sequel, and if it does come out, I will be picking it up right away. So yes, if you like a paranormal romance, I would recommend picking this one up. So there we go. That is all the books I read in April. Tried to be as concise as possible, even though I do ramble a little bit. If you'd like to see more content from me, please like and subscribe. I will be posting new videos every Sunday. Linked in the description box below will be links to the books and any reviews if I have any of them, if you want some more cohesive thoughts than this babbling nonsense that happened. Also in the description box below are links to my social media channels if you would like to follow me or chat to me on any other corner of the internet. Comment down below and let me know what your favorite read of April was, or maybe leave a not emoji. Anyway, that is all from me today, guys. I hope you're doing all kinds of well, and I will speak to you soon. See ya!